All right, let's get right into it. Today's explainer is tackling a massive 190-year journey from early colonial conquest all the way to India's independence. Now, if you're prepping for your UPSC exams, or honestly, if you just want to grasp the true mechanics of modern Indian history, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to explicitly structure this entire timeline to master the cause and effect narrative. Because, history isn't just some random list of dates to memorize. It's this fascinating chain reaction where every single British action triggered a powerful, undeniable Indian reaction.
To make this super dense history totally clear and digestible, we're breaking it down into 5 key phases: British expansion and control, sparks of Indian nationalism, the assertive resistance, the era of mass movements, and lastly, the final fight for freedom. Okay, starting off with Phase 1, British expansion and control. Subtitle, The Corporate Takeover, covering 1757 to 1857. So how exactly does a corporate trading entity end up establishing absolute political control over a vast subcontinent? Well, it started with a massive domino effect in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. That was really the spark of British political dominance, using Bengal as their home base. And then, just a few years later, the 1764 Battle of Buxar essentially locked in their military supremacy and handed them Diwandi rights, meaning they could now collect the revenue. These rapid, huge military victories were so disruptive that they actually forced the British government back home to step in with the 1773 Regulating Act. This introduced a governor-general system and, for the very first time, slapped parliamentary control onto the company. And that wild, rapid expansion practically forced the creation of a dual control system under Pitt's India Act in 1784. This essentially split administrative power right down the middle, between the British Crown on one side and the East India Company on the other. At the same time, you had these massive structural shifts happening on the ground, like the 1793 Permanent Settlement, which births a super powerful new Zamindari class and just completely flipped agrarian relations upside down. Now, fast forward to 1857, and the pressure cooker finally bursts. It wasn't just one isolated incident, right? It was a compounding, explosive mix of aggressive political annexations, massive economic drain, and the literal spark of those infamous greased cartridges. All of this collided to ignite a massive Indian rebellion that permanently, and I mean permanently, ended company rule entirely, transferring power directly to the British Crown. Now, the military revolt itself was brutally suppressed, but it changed absolutely everything. And this brings us to a really fascinating pivot for our explainer. How on earth did the ashes of a crushed military rebellion manage to fertilize the ground for actual, organized political resistance? That brings us right to Phase 2, Sparks of Indian Nationalism. This covers social reform and early organization from 1885 to 1905. Before anyone could realistically demand political rights, there was this intense period of internal social reform that had to pave the way. You had champions like Raja Rammohan Roy fighting for massive milestones like the abolition of sati in 1829. And over time, this powerful spirit of social reform organically transitioned into a formally organized national platform, which gives us the Indian National Congress in 1885. Now, the British did toss out some minor concessions like the 1892 Indian Councils Act, but the real, undeniable catalyst hit in 1905 with the partition of Bengal. This administrative division was so deeply unpopular that it triggered an immediate, explosive reaction, launching this with Deshi boycotts and literally lighting massive bonfires of foreign goods. But as you might expect, those rapidly escalating external protests caused some serious internal friction. A really bitter debate broke out over how to handle the Bengal partition. Like, do we restrict the boycott just to Bengal, or do we take this whole thing nationwide? That disagreement culminated in the 1907 Surat split. The movement officially fractured, dividing strategies squarely between the moderates on one side and the extremists on the other. Moving right along to Phase 3. The assertive resistance, from home rule to repression, spanning 1905 to 1919. So, during this era, those polite, carefully worded petitions of the past were completely thrown out the window. They were replaced by hardline demands for self-government, championed by powerhouse leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant. And with this shift came an entirely new, highly effective political weapon, satyagraha. Actually, this is a crucial turning point because it marks the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi's mass politics in India. Instead of just a bunch of intellectuals sitting in meeting halls, Gandhi went out and mobilized the peasantry through nonviolent resistance. He proved it worked first in the Champaran Satyagraha of 1917, and then again during the Kheda Satyagraha in 1918. Faced with this surging assertiveness and unprecedented cooperation thanks to the 1916 Lucknow Pact between the Congress and the Muslim League, the colonial government totally lashed out. In 1919, they forced through the draconian Rowlatt Act, basically giving themselves sweeping powers to arrest people without a trial. The protest against this incredibly repressive law tragically led to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and honestly, this was an irreversible point of no return. Any lingering faith the public had in British justice was completely, utterly shattered, which perfectly sets up Phase 4, Era of Mass Movements, nationwide mobilization from 1920 to 1935. That horrific repression we just talked about, it sparked an era of mass participation unlike anything the subcontinent had ever seen. It reached literally every corner of the country. In 1920, the non-cooperation movement launched, triggering massive, nationwide boycotts of foreign goods, schools, and courts. But then, in 1922, everything ground to a halt. Following a violent clash at Chowri Chowra where a police station was torched, Gandhi, who was strictly sticking to his principles of non-violence, abruptly withdrew the entire movement. Now, following that sudden withdrawal, we see a massive ideological shift. Throughout the 1920s, Indians were busy forming the Swaraj Party to infiltrate legislatures, protesting the All-British Simon Commission, and even drafting their very own constitutional framework known as the Nehru Report. But the real definitive breakthrough happened during the 1929 Lahore session of the Congress. The ultimate goal officially escalated. No more settling for dominion status. The new demand was Purna Swaraj, absolute, complete independence. That bold declaration just created this unstoppable momentum. In 1930, Gandhi marched 240 miles to the sea for the spectacular Dandi March. He directly defied the salt tax, grabbed the whole world's attention, and officially launched the civil disobedience movement. The years that followed were packed with intense political maneuvering, including the 1932 Pune Pact between Gandhi and B.R. Ambedkar, which secured reserved seats for depressed classes instead of entirely separate electorates. Ultimately, all of this relentless nationwide pressure forced the British to pass the Government of India Act in 1935, which was by far their largest constitutional reform up to that point. And that brings us to our final historical section, Phase 5, the final fight for freedom, the culmination, 1939 to 1947. By the 1940s, the whole geopolitical landscape was practically turned upside down, and the pressure was caving in from all sides. Global warfare and massive domestic uprisings were actively breaking the British hold on the subcontinent. In 1942, right after the Cripps mission completely failed, the Quit India movement launched, sparking a massive, leaderless anti-colonial uprising. Meanwhile, outside India's borders, Subhash Chandra Bose was fueling fierce military nationalism with his Indian National Army. The combined crushing weight of both civil and military defiance made holding on to India literally impossible for the British. This forced their hand, leading to the 1946 Cabinet Mission to try and establish a framework for the actual transfer of power. You see, the outbreak of World War II in 1939 had severely accelerated this entire constitutional crisis. It left Britain both economically and militarily totally exhausted. So by 1947, the inevitable finally happened. The Indian Independence Act officially ended British rule. But of course, it came at a profound, devastating cost: the simultaneous and deeply tragic partition of India, creating the two newly independent nations of India and Pakistan. Okay, so if you are gearing up for your UPSC exams, you are definitely going to want to take a mental screenshot of the information we've compiled here. We pulled these super important themes directly from the source material to create the ultimate study guide. Notice how grouping the history conceptually from constitutional development and reform movements all the way to the specific milestones of the Gandhian era makes tackling those heavy main exam questions significantly easier. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. As our source material brilliantly summarizes, this entire 190-year timeline is fundamentally a story of transformation. It was this grueling, incredibly complex era where every single colonial action, from the early battles of Plassey and Buxar all the way to the repressive Rowlatt Act, birthed a more organized and, ultimately, more unstoppable national reaction. And, of course, it culminated in total freedom. So, we have covered a massive amount of ground in today's explainer. After examining this incredible, nearly 2-century-long chain of cause and effect, I want to hear from you. Which specific phase or exact event do you genuinely believe was the ultimate point of no return? Was it the 1857 revolt, the arrival of Gandhi, or maybe the Quit India movement? Think about it, keep digging into the history, and absolutely use this structured approach to completely master your exam prep.